So Andrew, my homie, we go way back. Andrew is going to talk about minimum viable messaging. Well, that's a cool idea, cool concept. So Coda, has some really good messaging. Is known for it. Andrew, hop on the stage if you're around. Let's see what is up. Boom.
What's up? Great to be here. I was trying to be as fashionable as I could because I know I had to share the stage with you.
Hey, man, always good to see your smile. Look at this handsome boy, huh? All right.
Stop.
All right,
stop.
guys. I'm gonna hop off. You share your screen if you have any slides, and then
You got it.
We'll catch up after.
Hi guys. When I joined Coda a couple years ago as the first product marketing manager, one of the very first things that happened was our head of enterprise sales, Joe, pulled me aside. He said, Andrew, we cannot be on sales calls finding out about feature launches from our customers anymore. That's just not a good look for anyone, especially us when we're trying to close deals. And previously, I was coming from Instagram, which is obviously a big part of Facebook, and was maybe shipping a big product update out of my product area maybe every 6 months. So you can imagine I had the time and resources for message testing, focus groups, working cross-functionally to really fine-tune our messages. And all of a sudden I'm at Coda where I was just not going to have that opportunity because we launched, on average 2 things per week. So I had to learn really quickly how to make sure that we got a salient message into market that worked for everyone who was on the front lines, that scaled across our user base and helped motivate people who maybe had never even heard of Coda before. So I am Andrew Stinger, and this is my take on what I like to call a minimum viable message. Or, oh shit, I need to position this launch as fast as possible. So I know about you, first I'll just jump into why do you need a message? Hopefully we're all aligned on that, but the less stewardship you give to a product as it's going to market, the more you're gambling that folks are going to infer the why behind it, why you launched it, what it's supposed to do. And I don't know about you, but I'm like a maximum 48 hours in Las Vegas kind of guy. So I am not trying to have a career of gambling. I'm trying to have a career of strategic thinking. And for me, that's where minimum viable messages come into play. So I'm presenting actually out of a Coda doc. I mean, I have to, I work at Coda, right? It would be bad form if I didn't. So what is a minimum viable message? Quite frankly, you can look at it as something that is comparable to a minimum viable product. So I know as product marketers who are on the call, we get to work really often with amazing product managers. And sometimes the play to learn how a product is going to work best is to get a minimum viable product into market. The baseline features and requirements are there. You can get it in the hands of users and you can really quickly get their feedback so that you don't go too far down a rabbit hole and find out you're not rabbit sized with your product, right? So a minimum viable message is the same thing. It's that, but for marketing messages. So you don't have to have the fully baked out message. Trust me, I love to work with tools like Wynter and do the message testing. It's part of my DNA as a marketer, but it's not something that we always have the bandwidth to do or the opportunity. So a minimum viable message is an opportunity to put a clear, concise message out into the audience that you're trying to reach, get the feedback on, is it understandable? Does it resonate in the way you want to? And you can track how it resonates through all sorts of anecdata and other things. It's also a chance to make sure that you're guiding your initial users. So you're always going to want to iterate, right? That is the marketer's job, just like it's the product manager's job to launch and iterate. But a minimum viable message is how you get your foot in the door to start that process. So the first thing is not, why a minimum viable message or what it is, but you have to ask yourself, do you need a minimum viable message? So answering this question can be something you answer for yourself, but it's also something you have to make sure your team is on board with, right? As a general rule of thumb, I say, look, if a customer is going to look for information about this thing, this change, this new thing, it needs a message and it needs to be in a place where they're going to find it. But how do you know if you can get away with a minimum viable message or if you need to negotiate with your colleagues for more lead time? to develop a more salient message. You need to go beyond the minimum. I think of different things like there's a technical cost sometimes to having a product that is ready to launch, but you need to hold it back because you need time to do the message testing, right? There's an opportunity cost behind that as well. So how do you know if it's worth asking your team to pay that cost, or if you have the opportunity to move really quickly alongside your team and get a minimum viable message out into your audience? The answer is to have some sort of tiering system for your product launches, for your campaigns. And if you do not have a tiering system, I am happy to lend you mine. Here's a framework that works really well for me. Number one is, are people just going to see this really easily? If they are going to see it, are they going to have questions about it? And do we need to make sure that we can answer those questions really quickly? If they are not going to see it and we want them to see it, then we also have to consider that. Does a user have to take action to get value from what you're telling them about? Is there an implicit benefit? How great is the benefit? Does it disrupt a common usage pattern? You know, that who moved my cheese experience? And to what degree does that happen? Is there going to be business impact? Obviously, if you're moving a company metric, you probably want to spend a little more time, and an MVM is not going to work for you. And of course, time is not an unlimited resource. Energy is not an unlimited resource. You know, unfortunately, the laws of physics are true, and there are only so many hours in a day. And I like to spend some of those hours, at least, like walking my senior dog and having a beer with friends. So if I'm only given a few days to get a launch together, I need to balance my life and that launch. But if I looked at Coda, where we were launching things like 2 feature updates on average per week, if I just stayed on that launch treadmill, my personal life would fall apart, of course, because I would probably just work every hour of every day. But I also would not get to the other great things I need to do as a PMM, like inbound user studies and things like that. So this is a framework I actually developed. These are the tiers that we use at Coda. So there's a minimum viable message, right? This is something where it's a smaller launch or a minimum viable product, or you don't have a ton of lead time. And you can use kind of a lightweight brief template, and I'll show you some of those goodies later on. Or maybe there's kind of that middle tier where you want to go a bit bigger, or there's the largest tier, which are your big company moments where you know you have cross-functional support. You've been planning for them for a long time. There are some things that you maybe don't want to announce, but you still want to make sure there's reactive comms. So I can imagine if your company, for example, runs A/B tests, and you know some users are going to see one experience and others are going to see a different experience. Sometimes those users are on the same team and they're like, what the heck is going on here? And they're going to contact your support team. So if it's possible, you want to make sure you at least have reactive comms, but you probably don't want to announce that you're running a test because you don't want to skew the results of that. And on very rare occasions, you don't want to announce something at all, right? So you just have to be sure to be really, really tight with your team if the decision is not to announce something. So with these tiers, how do you actually get the buy-in across your team? At Coda, we actually run on Coda. And here's an example, obviously, of some fake launches, but we run through these questions together. And we do this as a group. And, you know, do we actually want to announce it? So for example, this A/B test, we don't want to announce. A massive update to our core app, we do want to announce. How easily can people detect this? How complex is the action they have to take? You can see all of these questions that I framed above. We score them. And then actually we have like a little formula in this column that calculates things to arrive at a score. And then in this table up here, these scores correlate to which of these opportunities we would use. And then there's still a bit of, you know, qualitative input that has to happen. So you can see largely these calculated guidance final decisions align. But here, for example, we have this big UX change where the score said, honestly, as a function of timing, we should do a minimum viable message. But we decided as a team we would go bigger. But that meant because we looked at the score and said, hey, based on our agreed upon tiering approach and scoring methodology, even though like this would come in at a minimum viable message tier, we want to go bigger. Product team, you might have to carry some technical costs to put this behind like a config flag or to hold the launch by a day or two so we can make sure we do the right messaging. We equip our cross-functional stakeholders who own different marketing channels to really hone a great approach for their channels. So after you've aligned on that tiering, when you identify, okay, we're moving quick, we need a minimum viable message, we have commitment to iterate upon it over time, how do you craft one? And this is where you want to do some lifting, but not all of your heavy lifting. And quite frankly, this probably isn't too much of a surprise, but a good old framework, tried and true, the 4 Ps of marketing, right? Place, price, product, and position. So first thing we talk about is product. This goes into your MVM because people need to know what you're launching or what the campaign is or what the opportunity is. Internally, I frame this in our briefs to the teams that will, be taking messages out through different channels like blogs, like social media, like paid channels as what are we launching and why are we launching it? Super important to tie it back to the why internally, because that will manifest differently in the external message. And then how does it work? I need to know how to move things around or get value out of this. And then what do I do if it doesn't work? Where can I go for support? What are the common problems we foresee? These typically take the form of like your basic FAQs. Externally, we basically just say like, why the hell does someone care? And then for price, people want to know if it costs money to use something. If it's free, that should be a huge part of your message. And a lot of times like UX changes, these little features, they are free. And I think sometimes as marketers, we miss the opportunity, especially if you are working on products that have like an annual subscription model where you're going to have true ups. Like go back and look at all these small changes and bundle them together at some point. That's a lot of free value you added to a product for people when they're coming up on their renewal that they may not think about because you told them it was free when you launched it. Internally, we think about on an individual basis, is this gated behind a pricing tier? So like Coda, we have a free plan, pro, team, an enterprise plan. If something is gated behind the enterprise plan, we need to know why, because people on the pro and team plan are going to know, why are you asking me to pay for it? There's also the cost that's not just financial, but the lift or skill required. We have certain tools, like we have a beta right now at Coda, where people can actually build their own integrations. Our goal is for anyone to be able to do that. But for now, you do have to know a bit of JavaScript. So there is a skill required. You can consider that potentially a cost to participate. And then you have to think about what persona is willing to pay this price and how you know they're willing to pay it. We frame this as, why is this an incredible value, no matter what price you're paying? And then, of course, place and promotion. First thing I'm going to say is use your data and review it often for place. You have so much free inbound as a marketer that no, you're not going to pivot an entire product strategy on one Reddit post, on one tweet, on one community thread. But you are going to be able to see how people already talk about your product in those different channels. So think about using that free inbound to say like, oh, okay, when we've said a message this way, that was received really well. What elements of that should we apply to future messages? When we put a message into this channel and people, popped off and hated it, what mistakes won't we make again? And as you think about, where people are going to look for information, at Coda, we know that at a minimum, we need to make sure our help center is up to date. Community.coda.io gets an announcement. We flag to put this in our monthly new in Coda email that we send out with our product updates. If you go to coda.io/updates, you'll see an entry there, and we'll put something in our social channels within a day or two of the launch. At minimum, we activate those channels for every launch. And we know that because we get great coverage across our user base, across those channels, and we get great amplification across those as well. Of course, there are other channels that we have used in the past, and there are other channels we use for our larger launches. But at a minimum, we prepare messaging for those channels. Knowing that that is where you're going to reach people gives you a lot of focus, because that lets you know what message works best in that place. So you know the audience that you have in your core channels, you know how they've responded before. So then you can start to craft message pretty quickly. We have a few templates and I'll walk through these, but we have a full brief, a lightweight brief, and a message map. And depending on your lead time and where you've landed on whether you're doing a minimum viable message or a larger company moment, we use these different templates to resource ourselves and our teams to generate those MVMs. So I'll jump into actually some additional tips around this and then show you some of those templates before passing over to any questions y'all might have. But when building your minimum viable message, first thing, a picture is still worth 1,000 words. Especially if you have a highly technical product or what you're launching requires a user to take action. We pair every single announcement about our products with at least an image, usually an animated GIF. So we can describe, the 8 steps it takes to use something in text, and we will put that in our help center. But if you show someone your cursor, click a spot, type a few words, and drag something into your product, like you can do with Coda, that is going to unlock and unblock them from seeing how they can do that. Because a lot of people learn through pattern matching. And when you use a small video or a GIF, you let them pattern match. So your minimum viable message is not just words. It is words, images, tone, all of those things that go into a great overall message, because your job communicating is never done until you've been understood. The second, I mentioned templates, and I will show you them. Know where and what your marketing, messaging, brief templates are. If you don't have them, be the hero on your team who builds them. Not only will that streamline your future work, probably get you a promotion or the chance to lead a team, but it's definitely something that when you decide you're ready for your next career step, you can say, oh, I developed the process for messaging at our company through these templates. All right. And I will share out a PDF, but if you go to coda.io/@stinger, you can find a message map template that I have, as well as a PM Hub template that requires some, that includes different brief formats. The last is, if you are in a position to be building a marketing team, test and hire for people's willingness to be generative. I cannot tell you how many interviews I have conducted where we give someone a case study exercise and they say, okay, like I would use, this SWOT framework and this other common framework. And then I would hand that off to the brand team or the copy team to come up with the messaging. If you are working in startup land, or if you are working at a small company, it's just not going to work. All right. You are adding steps to process. Of course, different parts of marketing are scientific, but marketing is also an art form. So be prepared to be artful. And especially for product marketing managers, we're often hired to be generalists. I mean, I am sometimes during my day, I'm also the Coda content policy team. So it's going to be really hard to find a time in your role where you are only ever doing analysis instead of putting things together into frameworks. Additionally, if you work cross-functionally, people like to have something to respond to. So if you've only ever had a conversation about something and you're talking about things kind of in the abstract, people will be like, yeah, that sounds good. That's okay. Or I'm not sure I like that. You might wind up debating really nuanced points that are not that important. But if you have a black pen, a draft, something for people to respond to, you're going to, one, show your product design and engineering partners like how you understand their product and that you care. And you're going to get much more helpful, targeted, guided feedback. Additionally, if you're working with a brand team that has as many things that they're working on at one time as ours at Coda, a black pen lets your brand copywriters come in and use their red pen skills and focus on story and tone, versus having to like really quickly be like, okay, what is this product? What does it do? Like, you should be the product expert or the campaign expert. So putting that together and doing that first round of synthesis is going to allow the rest of your cross-functional teammates to then put their spin on it. If you are in a position to be hiring, a couple things that I have found have helped us hire people who are willing to be generative is to use your interview process to test for that. We do a take-home exercise. I think it's pretty standard practice to have like a case study option for folks in their interviews. Have them complete the take-home exercise and share it before their on-site interview. So you can get a sense for someone's thought process, but you can also look at how they explain themselves, explain their thought process. You don't need people to necessarily generate like 10,000 different assets, but you do want to see how they frame their solution. And if all you get are, graphs, screen grabs, and assets, reply back to that email and just say, hey, by the way, can I ask you like for what your top 3 bullet points here are? And in that little email exchange, you're actually getting a writing sample. If you do have copywriters or a brand team, it's not just hiring, right? That gets you a staff that's generative. We are always refining our craft. That's why we're participating in sessions like this. A lot of brand writers and copywriters love their craft and are going to be willing to host a workshop to work with your team to build up their generative writing skills. Even if it's just a session on like, hey, let's refresh how we understand our brand tone. That can really actually help folks become better writers. And if you don't have those resources, there are plenty of online resources you could take a look at. And then finally, we do something kind of like a design crit. So where UX, designers get together and they critique designs and bring their brainpower to them. We will have sessions where we'll say, hey, either here are some messages we launched. If we could go back, how would we refine them? Because we can always be refining our messaging anyway. Or we'll have a bi-weekly meeting with our launch squad and say, here's our sense of positioning for this upcoming launch. What do folks think? And just creating those forums will really make sure, even if all you have time to do is spin up, those quick bullet points, make it into a few paragraphs with an image and say, this is the message that we want to get out into the market. using your team will still let you sharpen it. And don't be surprised in this world of remote work, obviously, if you have it written in a document and you share it with folks, you can get asynchronous feedback really beautifully and really quickly. I know I've been chatting for a bit, so I will just show a couple of the promised templates. But a couple things that we make sure, if we have time for a full brief, is the TLDR. Even if you can only get through this as a marketer, this is going to be wonderfully powerful to your team. What is it? When does it launch? What's the one-line pitch? And then the what is it and how does it work? And then who are the audiences you're reaching? What are the benefits to those audiences? And what key messages help you convey those benefits? What questions do you anticipate? A marketer's job is to see around corners and say like, okay, even if we tell people every last thing about this upcoming product or campaign, they're going to have questions. What do we think they'll be? What help content do you need to update? What risks does this campaign or launch have, and how are you planning to mitigate them? And then you can draft your external comms. For us, we use the community post kind of like a press release, and that's, traditional product and marketing, like write the press release first, then build the thing. And then we draft our crisp 1 or 2 sentences for coda.io/updates and any other messaging you might want to think about your internal comms. And with Coda, we can drag and drop GIFs and images and things like that right here into our asset library. And of course, if people are really bought into this and they want to find more information, where's the PRD? Where are the design files? You can add those here. The lightweight brief is a pared down version of this. And then tried and true message map. Admittedly, we got this from the folks at GrokSpark. We like this one, but this template is available for you to copy if you want to go to coda.io/@stinger. But you can come up with some positioning statements, value props, and then come up with your 25-word, 50-word, 100-word versions of those. So I will stop there. That is my point of view on a minimum viable message, and I'm really excited to take any questions folks might have.
Folks are asking already for all these links, so if you can drop them in the chat or something later, that would be
absolutely
great. Yeah, images. That's a great point that you made. Often I find that whether it's in emails or just websites, the imagery used seems to be totally random. It's like people don't understand what is the role of the graphics. They think it's to entertain people, or like the designer ate some mushrooms and here's,
I mean, that might work for your Series A. We're really great, like really lucky at Coda. We had a brand team actually before I was hired. So design standards and kind of the principles and systems for spinning up these images were pretty well built out. If you don't have a team around that, like have that forum where, come up with something that you propose, like the visual language for our company or our part of the company is X. Everything from colors and key considerations you might have around that. Develop that system. At Coda, we actually have a couple like fake teams that we work with. Some of them are Jedis, some is the team from The Office, because we haven't gotten slapped with any like trademark infringement lawsuits yet, excuse me. But we have some fake docs, and we say, okay, here are our kind of faux teams that would get a benefit from this product feature we're launching. And we'll continue to use that same team environment so that it's a little bit connected. One thing that we are pretty aligned on as a group, but we might play around with it in the future, is while we have dark mode in Coda, we do most of our GIFs in light mode, just because they do pop a little bit, regardless of environment you're looking at. We have a couple of standard backgrounds we use. We try to keep everything under 5 seconds. If you're taking more than 5 seconds, you're not likely to get that full attenuation. Plus 5 seconds, people will generally figure out, oh, it's a looping thing. If someone's dropped in the middle of like a 12-second GIF, they might not know that they missed the first 6 seconds, and they might not watch around. So just some of these baseline considerations can be really helpful. And the tools at this stage in the game, I mean, you can record a quick loom really quickly and easily, or use Descript or Camtasia or Cloud App or Doppler. Like you have your full choice of tools to make part of your work OS, but just use the same tool across your team. That alone will make sure the look and feel of the assets you produce feels a bit more unified, and is not the like, okay, here's this like crazy color scheme over here for this launch and a totally different thing over here, and the designer on mushrooms. Worst case scenario hopefully won't happen.
Right. Yeah. I always tell folks where like think about the graphic you use. Like, does it add clarity to the message? Help communicate it, or does it
Yeah.
add value or impact? Does it make it like more desirable, whatever you're promoting there, rather than having a random clip art or whatever? Um, Question here: what are your views on using videos in your messaging, and how long should the videos be?
Yeah, I think this is one of those things where I'm of the opinion that, repetition doesn't spoil the prayer. And again, your job communicating is not done until you've been understood. And there is a whole class of users whose interest may be piqued by a written message, but it usually won't convert until they've had the full demo, right? The folks who need to talk to a salesperson. Video is a great way to scale that out. In terms of length, a couple considerations. One, where do you want to use the video? If you're putting the video on your website, you have a little more flexibility. Like if you go to coda.io right now, if you're not a user, or you go to coda.io/welcome if you are, we have our video that's, meet Coda, and it's Coda in like under 100 seconds. But it's still, a minute and a half. That's a generous chunk of time. We would not use that video on a channel like Twitter or Instagram because the feed-based media scrolling behavior means people rarely settle in for something that long. Maybe, I guess, like, IGTV. So think about the channel. If you're going to email a video, my experience is that the actual click to play rate on videos embedded in emails is quite low, sometimes because it just takes a while for them to load or render if they're embedded in an email. If there's a link, that sometimes gives you a little more time with the user. But again, I would say crisp and refined is always going to be better. But if you have the opportunity to create different alts, like have a few versions of the same video. So that Meet Coda video that you would see on our website or our YouTube channel, we actually do have cut downs of that we do use as like video ads on different platforms and things like that. So how and when you make that decision varies team by team. But I would say as you're scripting, think about like, what is the kind of total comprehensive message? And then in that, do you have the opportunity to pull out portions of that message that might be either more resonant because of a big visual execution around it, more resonant with a specific audience, and think about how you would use then those different cut downs to maximize the value you get there. If you're doing something that's a bit more like, hey, we're working with a targeted community, like on Reddit, you just like someone's asking a very pointed question about a new feature and you just want to demo it, make the loom that's the length it takes you to demo it and then share it. Because if someone's already asking, they're demonstrating high intent to view. So think about your audience, think about their intent to learn from you, and then think about the opportunity you have to reuse that asset and how you need to identify how you would make those cut downs.
I would add here that if you look at the on websites, video play rates, like visits and how many people watch a video, on average, even on like high intent pages, it's like 10% of the people on the page. So what I would say is video is not a substitution for text. It's
correct.
Like, you can add it on top, but don't make it just video because you're going to lose a lot of people didn't want to play.
Absolutely. And if you have the capability to run an A/B test, with different video lengths or video and not video, there was a time I worked at YouTube and it was a really great time to be able to say like, video landing pages are the highest converting landing pages. That was 2012. I don't know that that's true, 9 years later,
totally.
The stat is shared. So obviously, different types of users for different types of products are going to have different preferred ways of learning about those products. Like nothing shocked me more than when I worked at Coda and one of our #1 channels and things that people like reply back and say, I love this, is our monthly product updates email. I come from like the Instagram consumer apps who are like, stop emailing me. I don't want to hear this crap. But with Coda, people love it. And part of it, again, is our brand team is wonderfully gifted and makes these emails fun to read.
All right.
But another part of it is that's just the kind of user we have. And, we're a document product where, putting text and images into a surface to get your point across is the way people use our products. So of course, sending people text and images is probably going to feel a bit more native to them. So do really think about your channels and don't be surprised if the channels that worked for you and reached a certain audience for one company or one product or one feature are different for the next step you make in your career as a marketer.
Boom. All right. Andrew, thank you so much.
It was my privilege. Thanks for dealing with my fun tech issues. Always a pleasure.
Happy to be your QA.